Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. Charles Hamaker and Bel Garcia joining you as always for, it's not that crazy of a week, but still, Saturday was busy. We had 3 pro sporting events on Saturday. Three of them going on with the Sounders, the Kraken,
and the Mariners.
4, pardon me, and the Seawolves were playing that day too. They played earlier, but those 3 that we first went over were all happening around the same exact time. The Seawolves played earlier in the day with the 3:00 match start. So, with that being said, we've got our slate as always to get to you. Trying some new things out this week. We've got Seattle Star of the Week officially being integrated into the show. So we'll get into that next exciting. That'll be the final segment of the show today. And we will head over to the Seahawks segment, and Bel Garcia will take us away with that. So, Bel, what do we got this week?
We got a couple of things here for the Seahawks. The Seahawks are picking up Noah Fant's 5th-year option. So Fant becomes the first player from the 2019 draft class to have his 5th-year option picked up. Also announced on April 14th, Seattle would be re-signing Geno Smith. He will receive a 1-year contract worth up to $7 million. And Baker Mayfield stated on a podcast that Seattle would be his most logical destination. He stated so on the You Never Know podcast. Also says that he is looking for stabilization. Is that something that you think Seattle could offer Baker Mayfield?
No. Especially with what we just looked at, right? With Geno Smith here. Obviously you look at the numbers. It's like 735 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, an interception over the last 2 seasons. Obviously being more of a backup with Russell Wilson around, but with Drew Lock in the fold, right? And it's kind of becoming. It seems more likely that he will be the option that Seattle sticks with going forward. It seems like they really believe in him, and Bel and I will look at that as the season progresses, right? But we'll get to it with our first round mock picks here in a second. But it really seems like Seattle is sticking in with who they've got in their quarterback room. Mostly Drew Lock and Geno Smith. They've also maybe throw Jacob Eason into the fold, considering he's still on the roster. It's funny that he said that. It's like, oh, Seattle seems like the most logical option. I don't really imagine Seattle wants to pay his asking price or what Cleveland might be asking for him, let alone giving him stability, right? I don't think you're going to be in a competition either way, with Locke and Smith, already on the roster. And considering they just signed Smith to that deal, I think it like baseline, it's 3.5 million to 4, and then it could go up to that 7 with incentives, I'm sure, playing time, statistics wise. No, I don't think he's going to get any stability here if that were to happen, and I don't really think it's going to happen.
I think he's trying to speak things into existence now because it feels like he kind of has nowhere to go at this point. So I think he's just kind of hoping something will stick and he finds a fit here. But I don't think that's the Seahawks, and like you said, I don't think that's who they're looking for. But as you mentioned, our mock first round picks, here are a couple of options that we think the Seahawks are looking at. So you want to go ahead and start with yours?
So, that as we've continued since Russell Wilson is broke, right? I've kind of been sticking with this idea, this hope of Malik Willis. I steered out of that direction in this because solely, you hear that with these weeks heading up to the draft, and even as we get closer to the actual days heading to the draft, it seems like some of these quarterbacks might sneak up higher than they initially were looked at. I know that it was talked about that this is one of the lower draft classes for a quarterback in NFL history. But teams that need a quarterback, teams that are desperate for a franchise guy, are going to sometimes reach. I think the Bears traded into really high. I think they traded into 3rd or something for Mitch Trubisky, and that didn't necessarily work out for them, for a franchise option. Trey Lance, how's he going to go, with San Francisco going up there for him? Obviously, that's more, there's more time for him, right? But you see what I mean? There are a lot of times where teams will reach for items for players that probably they don't need to reach for. So, sticking with that, I'm assuming that Malik Willis might be grabbed by someone earlier on. And I'm thinking that with what I was mentioning about how it seems like Seattle was going to stick with Drew Lock and kind of hang in there with that. We both went in the same position group, but I went with Evan Neal out of Alabama. 6'7", so it's huge. 6'7", 340 pounds. I mean, and this is the thing
Wow.
too. Dwayne Brown hasn't signed and Brandon Shell hasn't signed.
Right.
So those guys are both free agents. So you're still looking at 2 tackles. I know last year you drafted Stone Forsythe, but there's no indication that he's ready to go, right? He had a 95 out of 100 overall rating by NFL.com and was listed in their grading system as a year 1 starter. So that's instant production, not like a Forsythe who might take a few years. I don't even know what his track to the roster is right now because I know he was a big guy. I mean, his name's Stone, so people thought that was cool. But I mean, with Brown still not signed and Shell not signed, you're kind of bare. I know that Jake Curhan, who was drafted as a guard out of Cal, I believe, played some right tackle, so maybe they're looking at him. He could be a cheaper option. He seemed to do well down the stretch when he played. So maybe they have him at outside tackle, one of the offensive tackle, and then you get Neal or who you're looking at.
Yeah.
And then you've got your tackle. So you're looking at a younger tackle group. And it would be funny, though, to draft someone that high on the offensive side of the ball when Russell was gone as compared to that when he was here. So you went a different route with a guy that I share a name with. So what were you looking at here with Charles Cross?
Charles Cross from Mississippi State. He's 6'4", 306 pounds, and he is 21 years old. So he's still developing and could potentially just grow into a good offensive tackle. And what?
Literally? You
like literally grow. Well, I mean, as far as his skills, he's only 21, so he has room for growth. And yeah, I just think that, like you said, we're not looking at a quarterback. I know that I saw some options for like a corner. I don't think we need a corner right now, so I'm sticking with offensive tackle because I think that he would add something to that line.
And it is interesting, in recent years, the kind of prototypes and molds that we've seen, from this organization have kind of changed, right? Like we were talking about, like you mentioned with the cornerback spot. I think with who they've signed and how many guys they've brought in, I think they're done with corner.
Yeah.
And do I like that? Not necessarily, but you and I aren't in those chairs, right? We're in these chairs, which are different chairs.
Still good chairs.
And so, the molds of having a big, lanky corner, or even like we go back to bringing in Trey Flowers, who is a safety, tall, lanky guy, and they try to make him a cornerback.
Yeah.
It's not what they're doing anymore. You saw that break with when DJ Reed became a starter, I know that I think one of the last offensive linemen that we drafted that high was Russell Okun back in the day. It was like 2011 or 12. And he was an offensive tackle. You pair one of those guys, you've got a decently younger line relatively. I mean, I'm forgetting his name. Gabe Lewis was drafted a few years ago, and he's still at one of those guard spots. Arsene Blythe isn't that old, and he's at center. Gabe Jackson's a little bit older at the other guard spot. Jake Curran, if he were to be at the other tackle spot, would be a younger option. So, younger option, but still talented, and like you were saying with Cross, still sort of developing. So yeah, that's where we're imagining it. I mean, I know the draft is let me see,
end of the month here.
Yeah, next week. So we'll have we can look at picks again here, maybe play that out again. But I'm also interested. I didn't necessarily want to do a full mock because of how often this team trades out of these picks. Like that number 9 pick potentially could be flipped to be more picks in the first round.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm really interested to see, one, if they actually stay put at number 9 and actually select somebody there, or if they're able to flip out again like they did. I remember, I think it was the 2014 draft, the one right after the Super Bowl. They had a draft party at the WAMU Theater, and the Seahawks had, 32nd pick. So we had to wait the entire draft up until our pick. And then what do they do right at the end? They waited till the final second of the clock, and they traded out of it to Minnesota, who I think, I forgot who Minnesota took. I think it was, I don't know if it was Bridgewater.
Oh.
Ooh. Minnesota took somebody. I think it was a quarterback. But long story short, yeah, Seahawks draft. The draft is really an interesting place, and so I think sticking with offensive tackle might be the safest bet. So we'll see. But also a lot going on outside of the Seahawks in the NFL.
Yes.
So what all do you have sort of the rabbit hole to take us down?
I'll start here with April 12th, and things seem to keep getting worse for the Washington Commanders. Congress says that the Commanders executives and owner Daniel Schneider were hiding revenue from the NFL for over a decade. So things not getting better there. I know we mentioned that some things got to change, so hopefully they figure that out. On the 13th, it was announced that the Raiders and Derek Carr reached an extension agreement. Derek Carr would be extended to 3 years, $121.5 million contract, and joins an elite group there for the above, I think, 120.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, of course, with Devontae joining the team and Carr being a big part of that, it was kind of easy to predict this happening. But on the 14th, also, Cardinals QB Kyler Murray said that he would not be playing without a contract extension. So we know he's been looking for that, and he hasn't received that. I don't even think there's been conversations with him about extending him. So he's decided that he will not play if that does not happen.
That's just been an interesting tenure with the Cardinals, right? Because I remember Josh Rosen was there for, I think, a year with Arizona, and then Kingsbury comes in, and I think they said, no, we're not drafting a quarterback number 1 overall.
Yeah.
And then they take Kyler Murray, and then Rosen's out. And in those years that Kingsbury's been coach, you see these, hot starts, right, in the early half of the season, and then the Cardinals plummet. And then there was this thing, I think we saw it earlier in the offseason with deleting all the posts.
Yeah.
And just all the drama of that. So Arizona is, they've got a talented roster, don't get me wrong. But, even with this franchise that we're covering, right, it starts with the quarterback. And that's something that we're still kind of looking to see to figure out. And if you lose a guy like Murray, who's, don't get me wrong, he's talented. He had his flaws, but he's really talented. I think you have to go back to the drawing board. And you took him with a high pick, and it's kind of him and Kingsbury. If one of them leaves, I think Kingsbury's out of there. So that's an interesting situation to sort of follow and see. Maybe he gets a record deal, right? You just talked about Carr. Maybe we see, maybe he's trying to leverage, but it is kind of interesting to follow how that the dramatics of the Cardinals situation.
It has been since, I believe, the end of the season that he's requested that extension. And so the talks not even being there is kind of concerning, but we'll see what happens with Kyler and the Cardinals. Moving on here, Brady's auction last ball, the sale has been voided. Of course, he unretired. And the ball sold for $518,000, and that was his last touchdown ball.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's been voided for good reason. And also 21 players will attend the NFL draft in Las Vegas. Is that next year's draft?
No, this year's draft.
This year's draft?
Yeah. So it's just only 20 of them, because they'll show the guys who go up and they hold the jerseys up. I guess only 21 of them will be there in attendance, and only 2 quarterbacks, Malik Willis and Matt Corral. So not Kenny Pickett, not Desmond Ridder. Only those 2 will be in attendance for the draft there. A bunch of them opted to stay home.
Okay.
But kind of interesting, to see who got invited, who didn't. I believe Trent McDuffie out of Washington, the cornerback, did. And he's not exactly expected to be a first-round pick, but it is interesting to kind of see who gets invited to these things and who doesn't. Like with the WNBA draft last Monday that happened right after we got finished recording the episode, for the first round, they only invited 12 players, and not all 12. Well, because that's who they expected to be drafted in the first round, and not all of them did. It was kind of like, ooh, so you're showing these guys, these women, and it's kind of awkward. It was like that 2014 draft party I was talking about just a minute ago. They kept showing Johnny Manziel's face because everyone, it was Johnny Manziel. They thought he would go higher, and his face kept getting redder because he wasn't getting picked in the first round. It was a funny situation to happen, but yeah, interesting to see who gets invited to some of these events.
Definitely. That was actually my next question, is how they decided what players would be in attendance. So that's interesting. On April 15th, Deebo Samuel went onto Instagram to post a video, just bringing attention to the fact that he's receiving death threats and racist messages following the story. I believe this has to do with the possibility of him leaving the 49ers. He did delete several pictures, I believe, of him in the uniform, and kind of similar to the Kyler situation, just kind of abandoned the following of the team and removed some images. So, of course, now he's getting death threats from unhappy people, and you never want to hear this because, of course, they're as much human as we are, and so not okay. On April 16th, the Carolina Panthers were favored to land Mayfield. Carolina has inside track amongst teams that are interested in the Browns quarterback. And someone wasn't very happy to hear that. Wide receiver Robbie Anderson commented no to an Instagram post about a potential of Mayfield to Carolina. Also on the 16th, Trey Lance believes that he'll be the starter in San Francisco. Lance has gotten indications that he'll be the guy next year amid Jimmy Garoppolo trade buzz. And of course, I think we've heard that Jimmy is actually injured. And was that a surgery thing? I think it was. So, looking forward to see who starts as quarterback for the 49ers next season. And all we have looking ahead for the Seahawks here is the draft, as mentioned, on the 28th through the 30th. So we'll go ahead and move on to our Seattle Mariners now.
So with that being said, I mean, obviously, just to take a quick look at that, everything that happened in the NFL with Deebo Samuel and then Trey Lance and all that, it's a lot going on. It's a lot going on, and it's just the offseason. So, yeah, the draft will certainly be interesting as well, and we'll have I think we'll take another look at the draft next Monday just to kind of prepare for that. But again, it's just such a wild card. You have no idea. You could, with Pete Carroll saying that they're still in a win now mode, they could flip some of those picks, maybe their second round picks, for a starter at some other. So we'll have to take a look at that once again when we get to it next week. But